Hello ladies and gentlemen, Top Hat Gaming Man here, curator of consoles created by a cornucopia of companies and corporations. Recently on this channel we have mostly been focusing on the obscure, taking in-depth looks at the history of the likes of the Pewter Jr., Casio PV1000 and Gakken Compact TV Boy, just to name a few. All of these consoles went head to head with Nintendo during the 8-bit era of gaming and were obliterated and almost forgotten completely as a result. The Nintendo Famicom / Nintendo Entertainment System was unit for unit the most popular gaming platform in the world. Despite this though, that did not mean the system did not have decent competition or adversaries that would put up a decent fight. The Sega Master System was the most likely system in the world during the 8-bit era to have taken Nintendo's throne. In fact, on many continents around the world, the Sega Master System did go on to become the most popular games console of the period. The Sega Master System defeated Nintendo in Europe, South America and Oceania simultaneously, making 3 of the world's continents Sega territory. The Sega Master System had a lot of upside to it, and in many ways was technically superior to the NES. Despite this, the Master System would never become the most popular 8-bit platform in the world, which was down to the loss of one key territorial market in battle. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how the Sega Master System failed in North America. Yeah. Before we sink our teeth into what went wrong for the Master System in North America, we first should look at why the system came to exist in the first place. There is a key difference between the Master System and many other 8-bit platforms we have looked at that went up against the Famicom. Platforms like the Atari 2800 and PV1000 were not equipped hardware-wise to compete with Nintendo and saw release in Japan in the same year the Famicom was launched. The Sega Master System, on the other hand, was released 2 years after the Famicom, so Sega had time to work on a device that was technically superior to the Nintendo hardware. In fact, in the console arena, Sega had already been competing with Nintendo for the previous 2 years, with the release of their first 8-bit console, the Sega SG-1000. The Sega SG-1000 was actually released on the exact same day as the Famicom, in a knee-jerk reaction from Sega, which was created from the fear that once Nintendo had conquered the console market, they may try and eat further into Sega's established arcade market share. The SG-1000 was weak and ill-equipped to compete with the Famicom, and featured a very similar specification to that of the ColecoVision. This product, that was rushed to the market, failed to compete with the more polished Nintendo platform, so Sega would return to the drawing board in an attempt to come up with a better plan. Before the launch of the Master System, Sega would try their hand in 1984 with something else, the release of the Sega SG-1000 Mark II, which was mostly just a simple casing redesign rather than a major hardware revision. The SG-1000 Mark III would change everything though. This system would be more powerful than not only the SG-1000 but the Famicom as well, and even come equipped with a Sega card slot, allowing consumers to play games using Sega card software. The advantage of these cards was that they were much cheaper to produce than cartridges, offering consumers a cheaper way to play games. It would not be long before the system would be remodelled for the North American market, much like the reworking of the Famicom into the Nintendo Entertainment System. The Mark III would be rebranded as the Sega Master System and would be restyled into a sexy sleek black case. Ooh. The Master System would see a launch in North America in September of 1986. This is 11 months after the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System in the region, and Sega are dreaming of successes of their own on the continent. The NES for the time was the most popular games console on the landmass at the time, and is credited for rejuvenating the market after the failings of Atari back in 1983. Some of Nintendo's successes are thought to be as a result of getting their products on the shelves as a toy. This was done, as we know, by pairing the device with both a light gun and Rob the Robot, and reshaping the device to look closer to a VCR rather than a traditional game console. Paired with the killer app Super Mario Bros., Nintendo's plan went down accordingly, and now Sega wanted to cash in on console's resurgence in the region. Over in Japan, the SG-1000 Mark III, aka the Master System, had already been around for a full year, and was not doing too well in the country. Rather than this being put down to issues with the hardware itself, Sega's lack of success was partially down to Nintendo's shady licensing practices that would prevent third-party developers from creating games for Sega's hardware if they were publishing games already on the Famicom. In order to combat this issue, Sega would have to heavily develop its own games and obtain the rights to port games from non-Nintendo hardware. Despite the Master System being 1 year old by the time it reached North America, it still lacked games compared to the competition, due to the restrictions Nintendo had managed to put in place when it came to third parties, so automatically Sega had been cucked when it came to being able to release games. The system was released in the United States at $200, which is the same as paying $457 for a console today. However, this was a similar price point to that of Nintendo's product, just 1 year earlier. The system came with a multi-cart, including both Hang-On and Safari Hunt, along with what they like to refer to as 2 high-speed controllers. The system also came packed with the Sega Light Phaser, a light gun which was Sega's answer to the Nintendo Zapper. In the platform's launch year, Sega were hoping to sell 400,000 to 750,000 units in North America. However, sadly, the Master System would only manage to shift 125,000 units. Nintendo, on the other hand, would manage to shift 1.1 million NESs, outselling the Sega platform by close to 10 to 1. As mentioned earlier in the video, Nintendo's licensing practices were hindering Sega to no end, and only 2 American third-party publishers, Activision and the Parker Brothers, had chosen to back the Master System at all. Marketing-wise, the system was promoted as the console that could bring the arcade experience home, and would boast that the graphics on the box actually matched the graphics of the games, which was a far cry from the Atari era the continent had previously experienced. Sega of America once again would struggle to compete with Nintendo in this area, as for some ridiculous reason, Sega left all of their US marketing to be run by a team of just 2 people. It is no surprise at all that the system had such a small marketing presence. Further from this, it would be quite difficult to get the Master System along with its games onto American shelves at all, once again due to exclusivity agreements Nintendo had put in place. In many cases, Nintendo had made deals with stores in the US that, in order to stock their products, they would have to sell exclusively Nintendo games and systems, so often retailers would automatically opt for the more popular product, of course being the NES. So between locking third-party publishers and retailers into exclusivity deals, Nintendo had come extremely close to completely monopolising gaming during the 80s in the US, offering consumers in the country less gaming choice than ever before. By 1987, after being on the market for a year, Sega had come to the realisation that they were in a losing battle trying to market and distribute the Master System in the US, with all the odds Nintendo had stacked against them. Instead, Sega would turn their attention to Europe, a wealthy region where Nintendo had yet to attempt to market their Nintendo Entertainment device. This new plan, as we know, panned out perfectly for the company, and the Master System would go on to become the most popular games console in the region, which is a whole story worth discussing another time. As for the Master System in North America, the story does not completely end in 1987. Sega would choose to sell the platform's distribution rights in the US to Tonka, a company who were hugely successful for selling toy trucks. In fact, speaking of Tonka toys, when I was just 3 years old, I received stitches for the first time, as a result of a large Tonka lorry falling on my head when trying to climb up shelving units to get stuff down. Despite being a company who was synonymous with distributing toys, Tonka had zero previous experience distributing electronics, so the Master System was completely new territory for the company. Like Sega, Tonka too would do a poor job of distributing the Master System across the US. the company would make bizarre decisions, including the blocking of localization of several popular games. At the end of the day though, Tonka would simply face much of the same challenges as Sega themselves would face when marketing the system, as Nintendo simply had everything locked down. In fact, in the region, the Master System would even be outsold by the bloody Atari 7800 of all things. The Atari 8-bit system, released in 1986, looked to cash in on the console craze that Nintendo had resurrected. Unlike Sega at the time, Atari had a good level of brand recognition in the region, and the 7800 was even backwards compatible with the 2600, meaning consumers could go back and play their already established library of games. So the Master System was very much the third place 8-bit system, and that is without even mentioning the turbo graphics that would arrive on the scene later. The final chapter of the Master System in the United States took place in 1990. Sega had returned to the US market with their Genesis system, which was much more powerful than that of Nintendo's entertainment product. As we know, the system would eventually feature its own killer app in the form of Sonic the Hedgehog, and would receive cutting-edge marketing to drive sales of the platform. This new success would finally significantly cut into Nintendo's market share, even outselling them in the region for a time. This would eventually lead to Sega actually going as far as buying back the rights to the distribution of the Master System in the region, which would in turn result in the release of the Master System 2, a budget alternative to the Genesis that would still allow users to experience a Sonic the Hedgehog game. In fact, Sonic the Hedgehog, released for the Master System in 1991, would be the final release of a first-party Master System game on US soil. Whilst all this was going on, in other regions the Master System would prosper. This would include the likes of Europe, South America and Oceania, as we mentioned earlier, and all of these places would get games for years to come. Amongst this, we would see a slew of both first-party and third-party releases, including a whole range of Sonic titles, Mortal Kombat and even Street Fighter. Sega would eventually conquer the USA with their Sega Genesis. However, if it was not from learning from the missteps the company had taken with the Master System in the region at an earlier time, then maybe taking the market in the area would never have happened. So ladies and gentlemen, I suppose that is the story of the Master System's failure in the United States. Let me know in the comment section if you learned anything new from today's video. I usually try my best to cover underrepresented consoles throughout gaming history, and I feel the Master System is extremely underappreciated in the US. If you enjoyed today's content, please do not forget to like, comment, subscribe and hit the notification bell to get weekly content like this straight to your phone every week. Finally, my channel Top Hat Gaming Man is funded by the fantastic support I receive from the amazing Patreon backers who continuously go above and beyond to push this channel forward. So shout outs to Carl Johnson, Shizuka Kobayashi, JD Robbins, Greg Hooper, Seabass the Great, Sint Spacies, Kevin Fahaley, Andrew Bazansky, Edward O'Reilly, Tom Elliott, Quang DX, Spudge Matt B, Michael Baker, Hans Christian, Computer Man and all of my other patrons. You guys are continuing to change my life. Thank you.